Righto, g'day everyone. Thanks for giving us the time to have a bit of a chat. The regulators asked us to come and have a chat around some supervision leadership items we've been working on at Bengalla and where Mark's company's been helping us out as well. But I'll be recapping some things that we've talked about over some previous years, just to give a bit of an update on that as well. Righto, very high level, just to start with who we are. So New Hope Group, Bengalla perspective. So Bengalla's New South Wales in the Upper Hunter. You can see they're part of the New Hope Group. We've also got New Auckland and I think it's 26% now with Malabar. And then some ag operations, oil and gas and Queensland bulk holdings up there as well. So just a bit of an overview of the company. Where we are, Bengalla, so situated between Mount Pleasant and Mount Arthur, right in the middle there, just outside Muswellbrook. And then from a Bengalla perspective, so open cut mine, 13.4 million tonne we're putting out, 936 employees. So just to give people a little bit of context when I'm talking to some of this stuff. Righto, what I'll start on, we use this picture and we use this slide a lot within Bengalla. And what's actually written there, we well and truly mean, we are our people. At the end of the day, we're going to be talking over the next couple of days around a lot of engineering controls, elimination, all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, it's our people that are exposed and we need engaged people so we can get the most out of the business and keep people safe. Because if we don't have an engaged workforce, we don't have the trust and we don't have the ownership and accountability at the end of the day. And that's what we're really after. Righto. I'll show on this next slide something that's actually very close to us from a Bengalla perspective and pretty bloody tragic. But what you see there, that's Quinton Moore. Quinton was a tyre fitter out at Bengalla and we lost Quinton on November the 3rd, 2018, tragically with a tyre maintenance event. And this is where our journey starts with what I'm going to talk about. So, as a leadership group out of this, we had a good chat with ourselves and reflected, what can we do better? And that's what I'll talk through in some of this. I'll be talking through leadership as well as supervision improvements and that type of thing, but I just want to be aware, supervision wasn't found to be a cause of this incident, but at the end of the day, we tragically lost one of our guys at Bengalla and we wanted to improve within the business. Righto, so what we actually did, like I talked about, we reflected and we had a chat amongst ourselves, what can we do better? And within a maintenance perspective, we wanted to actually increase the level of supervision competence out there through the mine site. We've got a OCE certificate at the end of the day, so certificate of competency for OCEs, though we have supervisors in place across the rest of the organisation and they go through internal packages and they're great at their jobs, so they're promoted into supervisor positions, but are they actually meeting those prerequisites and that criteria to have the knowledge, the tools and the experience to lead their people, to build that trust? So that's what we challenged ourselves with. We knew we needed help in this space. So we developed a training needs analysis and we actually went to Deloitte and had a good chat with Deloitte. Next couple of slides I'll show you where we went with it, but back in 2020 we had a chat with Deloitte around, hey, can they help us? Because we want to replicate that certificate of competency process, but for non-mining supervisors. And they actually let us know that they were already on that journey with Bulga. So Johnny Martin's in the room and they'd actually already commenced that journey and developed a package with Bulga to exactly cover off on this. So this is the package. Now, Johnny Martin and I, we've stood up here a couple of years ago and talked through this package to make the industry aware of it and just what the purpose of this package was. And like I talked through, this is about non-mining supervisors replicating that certificate of competency process. So what Bulga and Deloitte already had in place was something that was more or less this, and we've made a few tweaks on it for Bengalla, and now it's available to the industry. Though I'll talk through our journey with it so far. But we've got people going through this, like I said, it's non-mining supervisors, so this will be anyone that supervises people on site. So CHPP, production and maintenance supervisors, mine maintenance supervisors, there's even enviros we've put through it, anyone that's leading people. And it's about making sure that they've got those minimum requirements in regards to the tools, the knowledge and the experience to look after people. It's a 6-month program, and you can see the different modules there. So at the start, 360-degree feedback, so they can get some honest and fair feedback from their peers. And that's people that are reporting to them, plus leadership, plus their peers within the organisation. So they go through the different modules around legal and statutory, leadership and safety, operational leadership and so on. At the end of that, they actually they go through some mock exams, so written exams. If they get through those written exams, so 60% pass mark, then they can go to the oral interviews. So with the orals, there's someone there from the actual training company, Deloitte, and then someone there from our organisation as well. So they've, just like the certificate of competency oral exams, they've got to confidently answer against those questions that we're asking them. At the end of that, if they get through that, there's another post-course 360-degree feedback and then a personal development plan that they have in place with their leadership to make sure they're continually improving. But it's about, at the end, that 360-degree feedback, they're actually reflecting on where did they start, where did they end up, and then what's their development plan to move forward. We've seen some good success out of this. If I can go to the next one. So we've seen some good success out of it. These are the results. This is about 6 months old. So from the industry as well as directly Bengalla. So 139 people will pass within the industry with this process. There's 48 completing it at the moment and 42 that have withdrawn or just did not pass. Now, you would be able to see from those modules I showed before, it's actually a pretty extensive process going through it for 6 months, the written exam, the oral exam, going through that. And there's a lot of accountability on those people and time commitment. At the end of the day, we have some people that say, no, this is just not for me. And that's okay. We look at different roles for those people in the business. But we're very structured in the way that you need to complete this program. This is a prerequisite, like I said before, so you've got the tools, the knowledge and the experience to lead people, get the most out of people from a safety perspective as well as from the business perspective. So that's what we're seeing from pass rates and the rest of it. But that's a bit of a recap on what Johnny and I talked about a couple of years ago, and we've still got that in place. The next thing that we did was in 2023. We actually felt that we were just treading water in regards to safety. We were having a fair few near-miss events, and where truthfully, we were just bloody lucky. We weren't seriously hurting someone. So we're asking ourselves, what's the next step? What can we do better? So that company I'm showing there, that's a company called ForgeWorks. There's plenty of different companies out there. This is who we chose to challenge us. And I'll make a point of that because we did a bit of a market review on who could help us understand how we're operating currently and what are those improvements we can make into the future. We didn't want someone that was just going to agree with us or someone that was just going to give us information we already knew. So ForgeWorks, they're a company, a safety-based company within Australia. They help all different industries, oil and gas, minerals, coal, as well as they do work for defence, NASA and that type of stuff as well. So we thought they've probably got some pretty good bloody knowledge that they can come and challenge us with, and they did. What we actually did, you can see what I've got up there, it starts with listening to your workers. We truly believe that. Because at the end of the day, there's no use us from a leadership perspective just sitting back thinking we have all the answers and thinking we know why people are working a certain way in the field or in the workshops out there. We've actually got to listen to our workers and get that feedback and really empathise with them to make sure we understand why they're doing certain things. We did a survey across the workforce. We got about 70% engagement in that, which was good. Then ForgeWorks actually did facilitated workshops. So we did 4 workshops where it was just technicians with ForgeWorks facilitating. There was no Bengala leadership in there. There were 2 workshops with just Supervision and ForgeWorks, and then there was 1 workshop with superintendents and ForgeWorks, and then one-on-one interviews with us managers. And that was all about understanding how's Bengala currently operating and what's going well and what's not going so well from a safety perspective. Why do we think those near misses are happening out there? What we ended up getting out of that, this next slide's pretty bloody busy. But what you'll see here, these are the results out of all the consultation, all the surveys, all the rest of it, and the discussions with our workforce. And it's pretty bloody sobering when you start to see this. There's a lot that's behind this, a couple 100 pages behind it. But at the end of the day, you'll see the quotes I've got there around workers had some fair concerns around trust between organisational layers, lack of engagement with frontline, balancing the performance risk and costs, and a blame perception. So it's pretty sobering as a management team to sit back and look at all this when we've got our own perception of how things are going out there, but obviously that's just our perception, and this is where we need to listen to our workers. What you'll see here is there's the 3 rings around compliant, leading and resilient. So I've got that down the bottom there. So the inner ring that's where our workforce are telling us they're actually just doing things out of the sake of compliance. They're not doing things because they believe it keeps them safe. They're doing things so they just don't get in trouble. And you can see we've got overwhelming response there. That middle ring is leading. So that's actually where they actually starting to get some ownership in the way they work. And if they think things could be improved out there from a safety perspective, they're starting to see that ownership in that middle ring. And that outside ring in the resilient, that's actually where they believe, if our workforce believes they've got control to change the way they work and to speak up when they need to speak up at the end of the day. So when things go wrong, people don't get hurt. So the more that we have in that outside ring, the better it is. Just to capture a couple of them, I guess, is around decision making. So at the end of the day, 67% in the compliant state. So that's where our workers overwhelmingly believe they don't have any part in decision making in regards to the way they work. So that was a focus for us in that area. And like I said, there's a lot of information behind it, but this is a snapshot of what we saw. So what we ended up doing, we actually developed some initiatives. So these are the 6 initiatives around frontline risk management, our Mate Safe program. We wanted to improve our learnings from these unwanted events. We wanted to improve leadership capabilities, which is what Mark will go through in a second. We wanted to simplify our safety systems. And I think that's an issue of every organisation that'll be in this room. We've got a lot of systems in place out of the sake of compliance, but are they actually there to keep people safe? And do people actually see that it's keeping them safe? So that's what we really challenged ourselves with. And then KPIs to support this vision, other than just recording the things that we did for the last 20 years. What are the things we actually do need to record out in the field that are keeping people safe? So I'll just go through a couple of them, high level. Our risk management, our frontline risk management, overwhelmingly time and time again, our workers are telling us we're doing these take 5s and JHAs and we're riding the same bloody thing down every single time. So it took us 18 months to work through this, and this is a very simplified version of what you're seeing there. There's a training that goes behind this. But at the end of the day, we listened to our workers, and over that 18 months, we worked with them. And what we've now implemented is, if you're experienced in that task and you're doing it every block of shifts the same way you usually do it, we've actually said to them, don't worry about your take 5, don't worry about your risk assessment, because you're doing that task every bloody day that you're there, and you're doing it the same way. So if you're going to write the same thing on your take 5, what value is that giving you? Because you're already trained, you're already experienced, so you're good to go. Where we actually ask them to complete their take 5s is when things are different. So this is different today to every other day that I do it. I need to woo up here, I need to actually work through this. The other one is with the JHAs, JSAs, and our work instructions. That's where it comes in when they're rarely doing tasks. So that's our major components, or when we're recovering equipment or something like that. So this has been a big step change for us, but I've talked about the ownership and accountability part, and this is about giving ownership and accountability back to the workers around their safety and listening to them. And we've seen some good results out of it. But it took us a while, and I just emphasise there's a fair bit of training that goes behind this. The last one I'll touch on is around our Mate Safe program, so revitalising that. So this is just a peer-on-peer interaction where, from a leadership perspective, we don't want to get involved in bloody everything, but it's around peer-on-peer, look after each other. Look after yourself, look after your mate. So no name, no blame, peer on peer, but at the end of the day, we need a little bit of information out of it. So where we've trained our workers is these two things down here. What do we need to do to make this positive behaviour normal practice? So if peer on peer, you're seeing really good work, how can we replicate that through the business? Might be from a safety perspective, as well as it might just be business outcomes. But also from a negative perspective, what improvements can be made to stop other people completing that poor behaviour? So that's what we ask for our workers to provide back to us. We don't want names, we don't want any blame, but what we want to know is what do we need to replicate for that good work, as well as what's that poor work out there that we actually need to eliminate across different crews to reduce those injuries. So we've retrained the workforce in that and implemented, and we're getting some good results and some good ideas through with that process as well. Righto, next one will be leadership capabilities. I'll hand over to Mark on this, because what we actually identified, we've been through, so for our non-mining supervisors, we've got that program that replicates the certificate of competency. But then we needed some more soft skills in this space as well, and that's where we've engaged with Mark and the company there.
Thanks, Kent. My name's Mark Maguire from a company called Leadership and Performance Partners. We established that business back in 2018, myself and Ross Grace. A little bit about us. We are based in Newcastle, so right on the edge of the Hunter Valley. And as Kent mentioned before, we really do focus on the programs and workshops we deliver around soft skills, behavioural skills. Some of those will be embedded into leadership programs. Some things will be standalone workshops such as negotiation skills or dealing with conflict and so on. We deliberately work in the non-accredited space, and the reason we do that is it gives us an ability to actually contextualise programs to suit the client. And that might be content, it might be referring to specific policies, procedures that the business uses, but also too, a lot of the programs and workshops that we do deliver, we like to use things like role plays and scenarios. So that contextualisation enables us to bring those in where it's actually relevant to the business and the people that are in the room. And we'll talk a little bit more about contextualisation as part of the Bengala program shortly. We deliver across the board to all different industries, mining obviously being one, manufacturing, construction, government, local and state. But being based in the Hunter, probably 50% of our work is with the mining industry, underground and open cut. Predominantly coal, and within coal, predominantly more in the open cut space. We have done some work with metalliferous in the past, so we have got that experience working with the industry and delivering these programs. As far as the Bengalla program was concerned, we were approached early 2024 to talk about what we could actually provide to Bengalla as far as a leadership program was concerned. Now, as Kent's already mentioned, they'd gone through a process over time, having people go through the Deloitte's program, but they saw a need or requirement that there was still some gaps there as far as those soft skills were concerned. We were fortunate in the fact that we had a relationship with Bengalla from the time we started the business. So we had delivered a number of programs to Bengalla over that time frame. A talent identification program, we run their onboarding program, a number of individual workshops for the different teams within the business. Another thing that we had done, which created a lot of value for us for this particular program, was actually provided real-time coaching to OCEs over a couple of month period. So we did have that understanding of the business, we had the relationships there. Bengalla gave us the brief, but what we did was basically go into a process of consultation with them. And one of the things that was quite effective, we spent a day with the managers, superintendents, line leaders from Bengalla. We organised a room at one of the clubs in Muswellbrook, and we really just spent a day going through about what the program, what we wanted to look like, what we wanted to be delivered, where they identified gaps within the supervisors and leaders on site. We had a room full of flip charts up on the wall, really a big brain dump, a big brainstorming day to come up with a lot of different ideas and concepts that we could then take away and start that process to really build the program, design it, and then work with them to actually come up with the finished product over a period of time. One of the key things was that the program had to align with Bengalla's values, which Kent mentioned before, particularly when we're talking to leaders in the business, having their behaviours align with those values. No matter what they do as far as how they conduct their day-to-day activities, it does need to align with what those business values are. So the focus was going to be on soft skills, some of the things that were mentioned, people's leadership behaviours, people understanding their role models, they set standards, how they conduct themselves, how they carry themselves, how they talk to people. Having performance conversations was another one that came out as of high importance. Positive feedback, constructive feedback, just touching base with people, building those relationships. Communication skills, which underpins just about everything we do. A couple of key areas there, some flexibility around communication, but for Bengalla what they also identified was a focus on their pre-start talk, so making sure they're communicated well, relaying the message so all the audience understands, and being confident when they walk out of those pre-starts that people know what they're doing, what they understand, and they're actually going to go and do those jobs safely, efficiently, and that it's quality work at the end of the day. A couple of other areas that came up, decision making, time management, and we also spoke about having those performance conversations, actually then coaching people to improve. And that was a very important component in one of the workshops that we did deliver. And one of the real expectations as part of that consultation was for those leaders and supervisors in those workshops to actually understand what their levels of accountability were. So they're going to take on those roles. There is that accountability that comes with it, certain expectations that we'll have on those supervisors and leaders. They wanted them to have a clear understanding of that by the time they walked out of the room after those workshops. And as I mentioned, it was going to be contextualised to Bengalla's requirements. So what did we end up proposing initially? When we're going to talk about leadership behaviours, we'll actually give them something to give an understanding of what they are, how they like to lead, what their behavioural preferences are. So we did get them to do a DISC assessment and debrief prior to the program actually commencing with the first workshop and induction. And what that gave us an opportunity to do was actually build a relationship with the participants, because the facilitators are doing the debrief, but it's actually getting the participants to think about their strengths and development areas before they turn up for workshop 1. It gives the facilitators an understanding of that as well, so we can individualise some of the specific training in the workshops to suit those people. And those DISC reports, we can carry those all the way through the program. So it actually supports a lot of the content that we deliver throughout the program. It was a 4-workshop program. Leadership programs can be shorter, they can be longer, but we landed on 4 workshops. Mentioned those key areas that we identified. So the first workshop was really about leadership, but leadership understanding their influence on the business, the teams and the individuals, and flexibility around their leadership styles and behaviours. The second workshop was focused around emotional intelligence. So once again, we could leverage off that DISC report, but also communication, flexing that communication style as I mentioned before, and we did have that focus on delivering pre-starts. Third workshop, crucial conversations, so having those performance conversations, and as I mentioned before, coaching people to improve, and even where it's that positive feedback, leveraging off those people who are doing an outstanding job, but we can also provide them support to provide them with more opportunities in the workplace as well. And then finally, the last workshop based around decision making and time management. So all very much based around soft skills to support those technical skills and the knowledge that they already have. The thing that came in behind the program, which we're actually going through at the moment, is then providing a 360 assessment and debrief post-program. The reason for that being the participants, line leaders and managers have basically got a baseline before they start the program. We do the 360 post-program. It's an opportunity to identify where they've improved. And there will always be those areas of improvement that they have picked up, but it also is then something which they can continue to leverage on, because once the training stops, we don't want their professional development to stop. We don't want them to stop improving their leadership capabilities. So they can leverage off the 360 for that to be an ongoing process post-program. As far as the contextualisation was concerned, and for what we did with Bengal, and this is probably by no means everything that went into it, but there's some key elements around the contextualisation. We made sure at each workshop it wasn't just about theory and essentially chalk and talk. It was actually getting people to do some practical activities, giving them some practical tools that would get them to role play in those workshops or address certain scenarios in the workshops. Those scenarios and role plays, we get those examples from Bengala itself. So they're relevant, they're issues they're seeing back in the workplace. Part of those performance discussions dealing with conflicts. So what are some of the conflicts scenarios that you might see back in that mining environment? The pre-shift was done as a role play, so examples of what they would deliver as part of a pre-shift, decision-making scenarios and so on. So it was very much contextualised about the things they would see and do on that day-to-day basis as supervisors at Bengala. So we went through that, once again, consultative process to get those scenarios. Throughout the program, where we could and where the business wanted to, we introduced the policies and procedures which are relevant to the business. So once again, they're following the correct processes. They get a participant guide at every workshop. One of the reasons we do that is in a 7-hour day, 6 hours of really face-to-face training with all the activities, there's only so much we can talk about on the day. So we make sure those participant guides, going back, relevant policy procedures, additional resources, materials, information is in those participant guides as a takeaway, so they've got a resource they can use between workshops, but also post-program. So essentially they build up a portfolio of information which as leaders is now a resource they've got to use back in the workplace as well. So when it came to the delivery, I've already mentioned DISC is where we started. Once they'd all gone through and done their DISC and the debriefs, there was an induction day before we kicked off workshop 1. Now, one of the things that has really made this program successful is the buy-in from senior leadership at the business. I've already mentioned the superintendents, the various managers, line leaders. We're very much part of the consultative process. what they wanted to see, where they wanted to have input. And it was really reinforced at these inductions because Cam Halfpenny, who's the General Manager of Bengala, makes it a point to be at each and every one of those inductions, gets up and has probably a 15, 20-minute chat about the importance of it from his perspective, the importance of supervisors in that workplace, and what his expectations are, and the support that the business is prepared to provide people who are going to be part of the program. And that's quite impactful as far as the program is concerned, to have him there. The other thing we did as far as the delivery was concerned was make sure or encourage those line leaders and superintendents to actually be at the workshops, to be present there, to have input. And that was valuable because they could talk about their expectations, they could share their own experiences and knowledge, but also what we had them do when we did the various role plays and spoke about the different scenarios, they would observe in the workshop and give feedback at the workshop. So actually seeing what the participants are doing, and that comes into relevance when between workshops they're having those ongoing conversations about what support they need, the coaching and mentoring support that may be provided, what those areas improvements might be, what they're doing well, and so on. So to enable that, we made sure before each workshop we briefed those line leaders and managers on the workshop, the content, where we wanted them to be involved, where they saw opportunity to be involved as well. So they actually had a good understanding of what was going to be delivered, which made those days work much more seamlessly when it came time for delivery. Full day workshops, 7 hours as I mentioned before, so there's a fair bit goes into it at the end of the day. But we always made sure that about 4 weeks between workshops. Reason being, there are, as we mentioned, some tools and processes we'll give them on the day. They'll role play some of those things. It's all right in that environment, but we actually want you to go back and apply these things in your environment at work in real time. And so in that four-week period, they've got an opportunity to do that, but also within that 4 weeks, as I mentioned before, we also want them to touch base with their line leaders and superintendents to talk about what they've applied, how that went, get some feedback, what they're doing well, where they continue to improve, what support they might need. So by the time they come back for the workshop, we can have that discussion, how they've applied it, what they've learnt, and what else they may want to work on. And having that support throughout has really enabled us to bed down a lot of those concepts back in the workplace. As far as the program is concerned, we have rolled it out now to, we're actually doing our 4th cohort at the moment. So we generally have about 12 to 15 participants per cohort. So around probably 60, 70 people so far have gone through the program. So as I mentioned before, once they conclude, part of that review then will be completing the 360. It does enable that ongoing professional development between them and their line leaders and superintendents. So that over time will be ongoing. And that's an ongoing support. So it's really, in many ways, that relationship between the participants and their line leaders, it's reinforced. They are having constant conversations. They are talking about what they can do to improve or maintain what they're doing well at the moment. So that's been a real benefit of the program. The program itself, particularly after the first couple of cohorts, we're very conscious to review after each workshop, what we were doing well, where we could still improve. So there was some tweaking and fine-tuning in the early days. We've probably got to a point where we are quite comfortable with the program, the content and how it's delivered. So we review it now after each cohort rather than after each workshop. And as I mentioned before, cohort 4 will complete their last workshop later this month, with plans to keep rolling this into 2026. So there'll be a cohort 5, is my understanding. And then potentially, and conversations we had with Bengala, to actually roll it out to some of the more, I suppose, what we might call the non-operational areas. So at the moment, it's very much focused around production, the prep plant and the maintenance areas of the mine, but potentially it may go further across leadership roles more broadly across the business. As far as the return on investment is concerned, much of what we see is very much, it's qualitative rather than quantitative. So we have discussion obviously with the leadership teams from Bengalla, but the feedback we are getting is that they are seeing improvements as far as the behaviours of leaders, understanding the levels of accountability, actually applying those things in the business. For those line leaders and superintendents, it's actually allowing them to do what their jobs are and not be dipping down to that supervisory level too often. So they're actually, as I said, understanding their levels of accountability. Succession planning, so actually enabling the business to start to identify that talent within the organisation. Feedback that the standard of those pre-starts has improved, so we're moving communication more, or communicating more effectively and get about outcomes in those areas. Performance conversations being done and done well. Safety interactions, once again, occurring more frequently, but being done well and having those good interactions. And when we can start to get those things moving, you're going to see the operational impacts around improvements in safety, productivity, quality, and so on. So as I said, from a qualitative perspective, that's the feedback that we are getting. Although I'll hand back to Kent in a moment. Kent has got more of the quantitative data, which supports some of the improvements that we have seen.
Thanks, Mark. Righto, just to wrap it up, this is the last slide, but to summarise the presentation, I guess, like I went through before, we tragically lost Quinton back in November the 3rd, 2018, and we asked ourselves, what can we do different? And it was about making sure that that didn't happen again at Bengalla, and how can we help the industry? And that's where we're looking at. So the non-mining supervisor certificate of competency process. So that's where Deloitte's developed it, a number of companies are using it, we're using it. But at the end of the day, if you're leading people at Bengalla, so leading technicians, you either have a certificate of competency or you've been through this training program. And like I showed before, not everyone gets through it. Because you might be a great tradesman, but can you actually lead people? And lead people to the standard that we need to keep them safe and to get the most out of them. So that was back in 2020. The next part was Forge Works in 2023, where we're having some really bad near misses, and we were just friggin' lucky. At the end of the day, we weren't hurting people. So that's where we got Forge Works to come and challenge us, and to make sure that we're hearing our people to actually give us all that feedback. So, like I talked about before, we listened to our workers and we changed a few of our processes, like I showed you. And we've seen some decent results out of that. And then that's where we've engaged Mark and the company at the end of the day, because, like I said, if you're going to lead frontline workers, you have the certificate of competency or you go through that Deloitte program. And then for the whole business around leadership is where we've got this frontline supervisor program, so which rounds out that process. What we've seen out of it, it's hard at the end of the day, like Mark said, to get quantitative data and all the rest of it. But our journey over these years, since 2020, since we've been completing these initiatives, is we've seen a 50% reduction in our significant incidents. And truly the one I am proud of, put my hand on my heart, is we're hurting less people. So 30% reduction in all injuries, so that's first aids and up. We're hurting less people for the work that we're doing out there. And that's around listening to our workers and making sure that we're adopting processes and changing the way we think. So that's the journey we've been on. Hopefully there's a couple of little insights there. Happy to have a chat later on that, but yeah, that's where we're at. Thank you.